He slid the document across the mahogany table with a sneer, tapping his Rolex against the wood. "Sign it, Jen. You're lucky I'm generous enough to leave you with your dignity, because you're certainly not leaving with my money." Preston Hayes thought he had won. To him, Genevieve was just the quiet, penniless girl he'd rescued 3 years ago, a girl who should have been grateful just to wash his shirts. He was so busy gloating that he didn't notice the older man in the charcoal suit, sitting silently in the back corner of the conference room, ostensibly reading the Financial Times. Preston didn't know that the man he had just ignored was Silas Archer, the billionaire industrialist who owned the very skyscraper they were sitting in. And he definitely didn't know that Silas was Genevieve's father. When the ink hit the paper, Preston's life wasn't starting over. It was ending. The air conditioning in the conference room of Blackwood, Hale and Associates was set to a temperature best described as punitive. It was sterile, freezing, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and old money. Genevieve sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple beige cardigan that had seen better days, the kind of wool that pills at the elbows. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, unpretentious bun. She looked small in the oversized leather chair. Across from her sat Preston, her husband, or rather the man who would cease to be her husband in approximately 10 minutes. He looked immaculate. His navy suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, hugging his shoulders in a way that screamed executive fitness. His hair was gelled back, aggressive and sleek. He was currently scrolling through his phone, ignoring her, while his lawyer, a shark-faced woman named Diane, shuffled papers with a violently loud rustle. "Let's review the terms one last time," Diane said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't look at Genevieve. She looked through her. "Mr. Hayes retains the penthouse on 5th Avenue. He retains the Hamptons estate, the Porsche 911, and the investment portfolio currently managed by Goldman Sachs. You, Miss Archer," she used the name with a distinct lack of flavor, "will receive a one-time settlement of $10,000. In exchange, you waive all rights to alimony and future claims on Mr. Hayes's assets." Diane paused, looking over her spectacles. "It is a non-negotiable offer." Genevieve didn't blink. She just stared at the watermark on the paper in front of her. 10,000, Preston chuckled without looking up from his phone. "That's plenty, Jen. More than you had when I found you waiting tables at that diner in Brooklyn. Consider it severance pay." There was a movement in the back of the room. Sitting in a wing-back chair near the window, partially obscured by the shadow of a large ficus plant, was an older man. He had been there when they walked in. Diane had dismissed him with a wave, muttering something about a senior partner waiting for a notary. He hadn't spoken a word. He just turned the page of his newspaper with a dry crackle. Preston glanced back, irritated. "Does he have to be here? This is a private matter." Diane shrugged. "Firm policy on witness protocol for high-conflict settlements? Just ignore him. He's deaf as a post." Preston snorted. "Great, an audience." He leaned forward, his cologne, something musky and expensive, likely Creed Aventus, wafting across the table. It used to make Genevieve's heart flutter. Now it just made her nauseous. "Come on, Jen," Preston said, his voice dropping to that faux sympathetic tone he used when he wanted to manipulate her. "Don't drag this out. You know you can't afford a lawyer to fight this. Even if you could, you signed the prenup. You get what you came with." Which was nothing. Genevieve finally looked up. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were steel grey today. "I didn't want your money, Preston. I never did." "Good," he snapped, the nice guy act vanishing instantly. "Because you're not getting it. Just sign the damn papers so I can get back to work. I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin at 7, and I don't intend to be late." Genevieve knew who the reservation was for. Tiffany, the 22-year-old PR intern who had been helping Preston with his late-night projects for the last 6 months. "Okay," Genevieve whispered. She picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen lying on the document. It felt cold. Just like that. Preston raised an eyebrow, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "No tears? No begging me to reconsider. I'm almost disappointed. I thought you loved me." "I did," Genevieve said softly. "I loved the man I thought you were." "Pathetic," Preston muttered. Genevieve lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered over the signature line. Scritch. Scratch. From the back of the room, the sound of the newspaper folding was like a gunshot in the quiet room. The old man stood up. He was tall, imposing, with silver hair swept back and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than Preston's car, though it was understated, lacking the flashy labels Preston adored. He walked slowly toward the table. His steps were heavy, deliberate. Thud. 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 "Excuse me," Preston barked, turning around in his chair. "We're in the middle of something. Sit back down, old man." The man didn't stop. He walked right up to the edge of the mahogany table, placing his large, calloused hands flat on the surface. He leaned in, looming over Preston. "I believe," the man said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate the floorboards, "that she is signing the document, boy. Let her sign." Preston blinked, taken aback by the sheer dominance radiating from this stranger. "Who do you think you are?" The man ignored him. He looked at Genevieve. His eyes softened, the hard grey melting into a warm, protective hazel, the exact same shade as hers. "Go ahead, Genevieve," the man said gently. "End it." Genevieve's hand trembled slightly, but she pressed the pen down. She signed her name in a fluid, looping script. Genevieve Archer. She capped the pen and pushed the paper toward the lawyer. "It's done." Preston snatched the papers, checking the signature as if he expected a trick. "Finally. You're free to go, Jen. Don't expect a ride." He stood up, buttoning his jacket, feeling like the king of the world. He turned to the older man. "And you should learn some manners. If you worked for me, I'd fire you on the spot." The older man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep stumble into a ravine. "If I worked for you?" the man repeated, a dry chuckle escaping his chest. "Mr. Hayes, I don't think you quite understand the geography of the situation." "And what is that supposed to mean?" Preston demanded. The man reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a business card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. He slid it across the table, spinning it perfectly so it landed right in front of Preston. Preston looked down. He read the name. Silas Archer, CEO and founder, Archer Global Holdings. Preston's face went pale. Every ounce of blood drained from his cheeks. Archer Global Holdings wasn't just a company. It was an empire. Logistics, tech, real estate. They owned half the eastern seaboard. And Silas Archer was a myth, a recluse billionaire known for 2 things: his ruthless business acumen and his fiercely guarded privacy. Preston looked at the card, then at the man, then at Genevieve. "Archer," Preston whispered. He looked at his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Genevieve. Archer?" Genevieve stood up slowly. She wasn't the small, broken woman anymore. She stood straight, her chin high. "You always complained that I didn't tell you enough about my family, Preston," she said, her voice steady. "You just assumed because I worked as a waitress that I was poor. You never asked why I was working there." Preston stammered. I wanted to make it on my own," Genevieve said. "I wanted to know that if someone loved me, they loved me. Not the money. not the name. She looked at him with profound pity. I guess I got my answer. Silas Archer stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on Genevieve's shoulder. He looked at Preston with eyes that promised absolute destruction. You have made a grave error, Mr. Hayes, Silas said. You celebrated taking $10,000 from my daughter, but you failed to realize that by signing that paper, you just lost the access to a $4 billion inheritance. Silas checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that was worth more than Preston's penthouse. Come, Genevieve. The driver is waiting. We have a board meeting to get to. Board meeting, Preston choked out. Silas paused at the door. Oh, didn't you know? Genevieve isn't just my daughter. She's the newly appointed majority shareholder of the company that just acquired your firm. The door clicked shut, leaving Preston Hayes standing in the freezing cold room, holding a divorce paper that suddenly felt like a death warrant. The elevator ride down from the 40th floor was silent, but it was a comfortable silence. For the first time in 3 years, Genevieve felt like she could breathe. When the doors opened to the lobby, the bustle of Manhattan rushed in, but it didn't touch them. 2 large security guards in black suits immediately flanked them, creating a wedge through the crowd. I'm proud of you, Jen, Silas said quietly as they walked toward the revolving doors. I feel foolish, Dad, she admitted, clutching her purse. You warned me. 3 years ago, you told me he was a climber. I didn't listen. We all make mistakes of the heart, Silas said. The measure of a sterling, an archer, is how we fix them. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom was idling at the curb. The chauffeur, a man named Henri, who had driven Genevieve to ballet class when she was 6, held the door open. Good to have you back, Miss Genevieve, Henri said with a genuine smile. It's good to be back, Henri. As the car pulled away into the chaotic traffic of Fifth Avenue, Genevieve watched the building recede. Somewhere up there, Preston was likely vomiting into a trash can. So, Silas said, opening a tablet. Let's talk strategy. You are officially divorced. The legal tie is severed, which means the conflict of interest is gone. Genevieve wiped a stray tear from her cheek and replaced it with a look of determination. He's currently the regional vice president of sales at Omnicorp. Correct, Silas said. And as of this morning, Archer Global completed the hostile takeover of Omnicorp. We own 51% of the stock. We control the board. He doesn't know yet, Genevieve said. Nobody does. The press release goes out in... Silas tapped his screen. 20 minutes. Genevieve looked out the window. He humiliated me, Dad. For 2 years, he made me feel small. He critiqued what I ate, what I wore. He brought that woman, Tiffany, to our anniversary dinner and introduced her as a colleague, then spent the whole night laughing with her while I sat there in silence. Silas's jaw tightened. Say the word and I fire him today. He'll never work in this city again. Genevieve shook her head slowly. No, firing him is too easy. He'll just spin it. He'll say he was a victim of corporate restructuring. He'll take his golden parachute and move to Chicago or London. She turned to her father. I don't want him fired. Not yet. Then what do you want? I want him to know, Genevieve said, her voice turning icy. I want him to come into work every day terrified. I want him to answer to me. I want to see him sweat. And when he finally breaks, then we crush him. Silas smiled. It was a proud, wicked smile. That's my girl. So, where to first? Take me to the boutique on Madison, Genevieve said. If I'm going to be his boss, I need to stop dressing like his victim. Meanwhile, back in the conference room, the reality was setting in for Preston. Diane, his lawyer, was frantically packing up her briefcase. She looked pale. Did you know? Preston demanded, his voice shrill. Diane, did you know who she was? Of course I didn't know, she snapped. You told me she was a nobody. You said she was a waitress with no family. If I knew she was Silas Archer's daughter, do you think I would have offered her 10 grand? Good God, Preston, do you realize what you've done? I signed a prenup, Preston yelled. It protects my assets. It protects her assets, you idiot! Diane slammed her briefcase shut. Standard prenups work both ways. By waiving your rights to her property to protect your precious penthouse, you waived your rights to the Archer fortune. You walked away from billions, literally billions. Preston sank into the chair. He felt dizzy. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. Hey baby, thinking about tonight. Champagne is on ice. Did you kick the stray dog to the curb? XOXO. For the first time, the thought of Tiffany didn't excite him. It made him want to retch. His phone buzzed again. An email notification. Marked urgent. All staff. It was from the Omnicorp CEO. Subject: Important announcement regarding company ownership. Preston opened it with trembling fingers. Dear team, effective immediately, Omnicorp has been acquired by Archer Global Holdings. We are entering a transition period. Please join us in welcoming our new interim director of operations, who will be overseeing the restructuring of the sales department. Preston stopped reading. He couldn't breathe. The director of operations oversaw the regional VPs. That was his direct superior. He scrolled down to see who it was. Ms. Genevieve Archer. Preston dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the hardwood floor. Genevieve didn't just shop, she weaponized herself. For the past 3 years, Preston had controlled the finances. He gave her an allowance for groceries and essentials, questioning every receipt that wasn't for toilet paper or chicken breasts. She had shopped at discount racks and thrift stores, shrinking herself to fit the small life he allowed her to have. Not today. Silas Archer sat in a plush velvet armchair in the private VIP salon of Dior on Madison Avenue, sipping espresso, while an army of attendants catered to his daughter. Genevieve stood before a 3-way mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the mouse who had signed divorce papers yesterday. That woman was dead. She was wearing a tailored blazer in midnight blue silk crepe, paired with trousers that were cut so precisely they felt like a second skin. Underneath was a cream silk blouse with a high neckline that was severe yet utterly feminine. It's aggressive, Miss Archer, the stylist said, tentatively, adjusting a cuff. Genevieve looked at her reflection. Her hazel eyes, once constantly brimming with unshed tears, were clear and sharp. Good, I'll take it. And the black sheath dress, and the red Valentino pumps. She turned to her father. Too much? Silas set down his espresso cup. For the daughter of a retired waitress? Yes. For the director of operations of Archer Global? It's merely the uniform. They spent the afternoon meticulously constructing the new Genevieve. The soft, messy bun was replaced by a razor-sharp, angled bob cut by Manhattan's most expensive stylist. The subtle makeup was replaced with a bolder look, a strong brow, and a lip color named Power Play. By the time they stepped back into the Rolls-Royce, Genevieve felt heavy. It wasn't the weight of the shopping bags Henry loaded into the trunk. It was the weight of expectation. Are you ready for tomorrow? Silas asked, as the car merged into traffic. I'm terrified, Genevieve admitted, smoothing the fabric of her new $3,000 trousers. Good, use it. Fear makes you sharp. Arrogance makes you sloppy. Preston is arrogant. That is why he will lose. Silas handed her a thick dossier. Read this tonight. It's Omnicorp's quarterly performance review. Specifically, look at page 42. The sales department's expense accounts. Genevieve opened the folder. As she scanned the numbers, a cold smile touched her lips. Preston had always lectured her on fiscal responsibility. He claimed he worked late nights entertaining clients to keep a roof over their heads. Page 42 told a different story. Dinners at Per Se listed as client acquisition. On nights Genevieve knew he was with Tiffany. Weekends in Miami booked under team-building seminars when no team members were invited. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had been embezzling from his company to fund it. "He's sloppy," Genevieve whispered. "He thought no one was watching," Silas replied. "Tomorrow, you show him that the eyes of God are upon him." The next morning, Omnicorp headquarters was buzzing with the nervous energy of a conquered city. The news of the Archer acquisition had spread like wildfire. People were clustered by the coffee machines, whispering about layoffs, restructuring, and the mysterious new leadership. Preston Hayes walked through the lobby doors at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes later than usual. He looked like death warmed over in a very expensive suit. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night drinking scotch and refreshing Google, reading terrifying articles about Silas Archer's history of corporate butchery. He'd tried calling Diane, his divorce lawyer, to see if he could undo the signing. She had laughed at him and hung up. He walked past the reception desk. Sarah, the usually bubbly receptionist, went silent as he approached. "Morning, Sarah." Preston tried to muster his usual charming smirk, but it felt brittle. "Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, not making eye contact. She quickly went back to typing. He felt a prickle of paranoia on the back of his neck. Did they know? Did everyone know his ex-wife was now his boss? He got to the elevator banks. A group of junior executives from marketing were waiting. When Preston arrived, the conversation died instantly. "Rough night, Preston?" one of them asked tentatively. "Just celebrating the big news," Preston lied, loosening his tie slightly. It felt like a noose. "Change is good, right? Opportunity." The elevator dinged. They stepped inside. "Yeah, opportunity," another executive muttered. "I heard the new director is coming in at 9 for an all-hands meeting in the main boardroom. Rumor is she's a hatchet man." Preston swallowed hard. A hatchet man. That was Jenin, his sweet, quiet Jen, who used to cry when he raised his voice, was coming for his head. As the elevator rose, Preston Hayes prayed for a power outage, a fire, an earthquake, anything to stop that meeting from happening. The main boardroom at Omnicorp was a vast space of glass and polished wood on the 30th floor, offering a panoramic view of the city. Usually, Preston felt like a master of the universe when he sat here. Today, he felt like a specimen in a jar. The 20 top executives of Omnicorp were seated around the long oval table. The air was thick with tension. The CEO, a defeated-looking man named Sterling, sat at the head, looking like he was waiting for a firing squad. Preston took a seat near the middle, trying to make himself small. He kept checking his phone under the table. Tiffany had sent 5 texts demanding to know why he was being so weird this morning. He powered the phone off. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the double mahogany doors swung open. Silas Archer walked in first. His presence sucked the oxygen out of the room. He didn't say a word. He just walked to the corner of the room and stood there, a silent sentinel of immense power. Then she entered. For a moment, Preston didn't recognize her. The woman who walked in was a vision in sharp lines and expensive fabric. Her midnight blue suit was impeccable. Her hair swung sharply as she moved. The sound of her red-soled heels on the parquet flooring was a rhythmic, intimidating clack, clack, clack. She walked to the head of the table. Mr. Sterling immediately stood up and offered her his chair. She didn't thank him. She simply took it as her due. She placed a single leather folder on the table and looked up. Her gaze swept the room, cool and assessing. When her eyes landed on Preston, there was no flicker of recognition, no leftover warmth, no anger. There was only a chilling nothingness. It was like she was looking at a slightly interesting smudge on the wall. "Good morning," she began. Her voice, once soft and hesitant, was now a clear, resonant alto that commanded absolute attention. "I am Genevieve Archer. As you know, Archer Global has acquired a controlling interest in Omnicorp. We are here to streamline efficiency and cut dead weight." Preston flinched at the phrase, dead weight. He'd used those exact words to her a month ago when telling her she needed to get a better job because her diner tips weren't contributing enough. "I have spent the last 12 hours reviewing your departmental reports," Genevieve continued. "Some of them show promise. Others show creative accounting." She opened her folder. "Let's begin with sales. Mr. Hayes." Every head turned toward Preston. He felt sweat trickle down his spine beneath his starch-stiff shirt. "Yes," Preston managed to choke out. He stood up halfway, then realized no one else was standing, and awkwardly sat back down. "Your team exceeded quota by 12% last quarter," Genevieve said, reading from a paper. Preston breathed a sigh of relief. "Yes, we worked very hard. However," she cut him off, her voice like a whip crack. "Your client acquisition costs are 40% higher than the industry average." "Why is that?" Preston stammered. "Well, you know, the market is competitive. You have to spend money to make money. Client dinners, entertainment." "Entertainment," Genevieve repeated. She picked up a piece of paper and held it up. It was a blown-up photocopy of a credit card receipt. "A $3,000 dinner at Maria on a Tuesday night in February. Who was the client, Mr. Hayes?" Preston stared at the paper. He remembered that night. It was Valentine's Day. He had told Genevieve he was in Boston for a conference. He had taken Tiffany to Maria. I'd have to check my records," Preston lied, his face burning hot. It was likely the folks from the Zurich accounts. "Strange," Genevieve said, dropping the paper, "because I checked with the Zurich team. They were in Switzerland that week. Furthermore, the second guest listed on the reservation was a Ms. T. Davis." A ripple of murmurs went around the room. Everyone knew Tiffany Davis, the loud, overly familiar intern in PR, who always seemed to be hanging around Preston's desk. Preston felt sick. She was doing this here, in front of everyone. "Your lack of oversight and misappropriation of company funds is alarming, Mr. Hayes," Genevieve said coldly. "I can explain." "You will explain it to the auditors," she interrupted. "Until the audit is complete, you are removed from your position as regional VP. Preston stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't fire me. This is personal vengeance." The room gasped. "You didn't yell at an Archer." Genevieve didn't even blink. "I didn't say you were fired, Mr. Hayes. I said you were removed from your position. We value loyalty at Archer Global. We intend to keep you on." She closed the folder. "Effective immediately, you are reassigned to the role of junior sales analyst. You will report to Mr. Henderson." Mr. Henderson was 24 years old. He had been hired 6 months ago. He sat 2 seats down from Preston, looking horrified at the prospect of bossing around his former superior. "Junior analyst," Preston cried. "That's a demotion. That's an entry-level job. My salary will be adjusted commensurate with your new role," Genevieve finished. "Your company car is rescinded. Please leave the keys with security on your way out. Your new desk will be in the bullpen on the 12th floor." The bullpen, a cubicle farm, no office, no door. "This is absurd," Preston hissed, desperate now. "Jen, please, let's talk about this privately." Silas Archer stepped forward from the corner. He didn't yell. He just spoke in that low, subterranean rumble. "Mr. Hayes, you address the director as Miss Archer, and if you speak out of turn again in this boardroom, security will escort you from the building, and your employment will be permanently terminated for cause. Do you understand?" Preston looked at Silas, then at Genevieve. The wall of ice between them was impenetrable. He slumped back into his chair, defeated. "Yes, I understand." "Excellent," Genevieve said, turning her attention to the next terrified executive. "Now, moving on to logistics. Mr. Davies, your shipping routes appear highly inefficient." Preston didn't hear the rest of the meeting. He just sat there, listening to the sound of his own life imploding, orchestrated by the woman whose heart he had broken exactly 24 hours ago. The 12th floor smelled like microwave popcorn and desperation. It was a sea of grey cubicles under buzzing fluorescent lights. Preston's new office was cubicle 4B, located right next to the screeching communal printer and directly across from the men's bathroom. He spent the first 3 hours of his day trying to figure out how to log into his new, restricted computer account. His company phone had been confiscated. He was left with a clunky desk phone that looked like it belonged in a 1990s police procedural. Around 11:30 a.m., a shadow fell over his desk. "What in the actual hell is going on, Preston?" It was Tiffany. She was wearing a skirt that was violating several HR codes and chewing gum furiously. "Tiffany, keep your voice down," Preston hissed, looking around to see if his new neighbors, mostly recent college grads, were watching. They were. "Don't tell me to keep it down," she snapped, leaning over the cubicle wall. "I tried to book our trip to Cabo for next month on your corporate card, and it got declined." "Declined, Preston. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" "Tiffany, shut up about the card," Preston whispered fiercely. "Everything is frozen. There's been a restructuring." "Restructuring? You said you were going to be running this place once you dumped the dead weight." Preston winced. Every time she spoke, she was digging his grave deeper. "Who is this?" a cool voice inquired from behind Tiffany. Tiffany spun around, ready to fight. Genevieve stood there, flanked by 2 very large security guards and the terrified 24-year-old Mr. Henderson. Genevieve looked impeccable, not a hair out of place. Tiffany looked cheap in comparison. Tiffany, not recognizing Genevieve from the few times she'd seen her in baggy clothes at Preston's apartment, looked her up and down. "Who are you? His secretary?" Preston nearly fainted. "Tiffany, stop. I am Genevieve Archer," Jen said calmly. "I own this building. And who might you be?" Tiffany's gum froze mid-chew. The name Archer registered. She looked from Genevieve to Preston, who was cowering in his cubicle. "I'm Tiffany. I work in PR," she mumbled, suddenly much smaller. "Ah, Ms. Davis," Genevieve said, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "The dinner companion from Maria." Tiffany turned pale. She looked at Preston, accusingly. "You said no one knew." "Mr. Henderson," Genevieve said, turning to the young manager. Yes, Ms. Archer," Henderson squeaked. "Does Mr. Hayes's current role as junior analyst require personal visits from PR interns during working hours?" "No, ma'am, absolutely not." "See to it that it doesn't happen again. Miss Davis is wandering far from her department. If she is lost, perhaps security can help her find the exit." The 2 guards took half a step toward Tiffany. Tiffany didn't need to be told twice. She shot a venomous look at Preston, a look that said, "We are finished," and hurried toward the elevators, her heels clicking erratically. Genevieve turned her attention to Preston, who was trying to meld into his ergonomic chair. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I expect the Q3 projection reports on my desk by 5 p.m. today. Mr. Henderson tells me you're behind." I don't have the software on this computer," Preston pleaded. "And I've never done those reports manually." "Then I suggest you start typing," Genevieve said. "I'm sure you remember how hard it is to make ends meet without a substantial paycheck. It would be a shame if you missed your performance targets this month." She turned on her heel and walked away, the security guards trailing in her wake like sharks. Preston stared at the blank screen in front of him. He had to generate a 50-page report in 4 hours using data he didn't know how to access for a boss who wanted to destroy him. He put his head in his hands. He thought about the quiet apartment he used to share with Genevieve, the warm dinners she used to cook, the way she used to look at him with total adoration. He realized, with a sickening lurch in his stomach, that the $10,000 he had given her yesterday was the most expensive mistake any man had ever made in the history of Wall Street. And the worst part was, he knew she was just getting started. 2 weeks later, Preston Hayes looked less like a master of the universe and more like a man who was haunting his own life. The fall had been swift and brutal. With his salary slashed to entry-level wages and his expense account frozen, the illusion of his wealth evaporated. The lease on the penthouse was terminated due to a morals clause in the rental agreement that his new landlord, a subsidiary of Archer Global, had decided to enforce strictly. He was now staying in a corporate efficiency apartment that smelled of bleach and despair, located 40 minutes away from the office by subway. But Preston wasn't grieving his marriage. He was plotting. He sat in a dark corner of a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, nursing a cheap beer. Across from him sat a man named Miller. Miller was a corporate headhunter for Vanguard Dynamics, Archer Global's fiercest rival. "You look like hell, Hayes," Miller said, eyeing Preston's wrinkled shirt. "I've had a rough transition," Preston muttered, checking the door. Paranoia had become his constant companion. "But I have what you want." Miller leaned in. "You said you have the Project Helios files. That's a bold claim for a junior analyst." "I was the VP," Preston hissed. "I helped build the framework for Helios before the takeover. I still have the backdoor administrative codes. They forgot to wipe my old credentials from the legacy server." It was a lie. They hadn't forgotten. Preston had stolen the password from Mr. Henderson's desk while the poor kid was in the bathroom. It was a desperate, felony-level move. But Preston felt he had no choice. "If I give you the files," Preston whispered, "I want a VP position at Vanguard, double my old salary, and a signing bonus." Miller laughed, a dry, scratching sound. "Bring me the data first. If it's real, we'll talk numbers. Tonight, midnight, the drop box at Grand Central." Preston nodded. He drained his beer. This was it. He was going to sell out the Archers, take the money, and disappear. He would win. He left the bar and headed back to the office. It was 9 p.m. The building should be empty, save for the cleaning crew and security. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. Beep. Access granted. He took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The bullpen was dark, illuminated only by the red glow of exit signs. He crept toward Henderson's office, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He sat at Henderson's computer. His hands were shaking so badly he mistyped the password twice. Access granted. Preston exhaled, a shaky breath of triumph. He navigated to the secure drive. There it was. Project Helios, confidential. "Got you," he whispered. He inserted a USB drive. He began the copy process. 10%, 30%. The progress bar crawled. Preston tapped his foot nervously. 50%. Suddenly the screen flickered. A new window popped up. It wasn't an error message. It was a live video feed. Preston froze. The video feed showed the very office he was sitting in. It was a camera angle from the ceiling corner. He saw the back of his own head. Then a voice came through the computer speakers. It wasn't the digital hum of a machine. It was a voice he knew intimately. "You really couldn't help yourself, could you, Preston?" Preston spun around in the chair. Standing in the doorway of the office wasn't a security guard. It was Genevieve. She was wearing a trench coat over her evening wear, looking like she had just come from the opera. Beside her stood Silas Archer, looking grim, and behind them were two men in windbreakers with FBI emblazoned in yellow letters on the back. "Jen?" Preston gasped, yanking the USB drive out. I was just working late." "Don't insult my intelligence," Genevieve said, stepping into the room. She flipped the light switch. The fluorescent lights hummed to life, exposing Preston in all his sweaty, guilty misery. "We knew about the meeting with Miller," Silas said, his voice calm and terrifying. "We own the bar." Preston's eyes widened. "What?" "We knew you stole Henderson's password," Genevieve added. "We left the account active on purpose. We wanted to see how far you would go." "This is entrapment," Preston yelled, backing up until he hit the window. "You set me up." "We gave you a rope," Silas corrected. "You tied the noose." One of the FBI agents stepped forward. "Preston Hayes, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, grand larceny, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." "No!" Preston scrambled, looking for an exit. "Jen, please! I'm your husband." "Well, ex-husband. Doesn't that mean anything?" Genevieve looked at him. For a moment, the room was silent. Preston searched her face for a trace of the woman who used to rub his back when he was stressed, the woman who loved him unconditionally. He found her, but she wasn't looking at him with love. She was looking at him with closure. "It means everything, Preston," she said softly. "It means I know exactly who you are, and I know I deserve better." She nodded to the agents. "Get him out of my building." As they handcuffed him and dragged him toward the elevators, Preston was screaming. He screamed about his rights, about his penthouse, about how unfair it all was. Genevieve didn't watch him go. She turned to the window and looked out at the city lights of Manhattan. "Are you okay?" Silas asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. Genevieve took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. "I'm not just okay, Dad," she smiled, and it was a real, dazzling smile. "I'm free." The morning of the sentencing dawned grey and wet, a typical New York drizzle that slicked the streets with oil and grime. But inside the penthouse suite of the St. Regis, where Genevieve was temporarily staying while her new apartment was being renovated, the air was warm and scented with jasmine tea. Genevieve stood before the full-length mirror. She didn't recognize the girl she had been 6 months ago, the one who wore oversized cardigans to hide herself, who flinched at loud noises. The woman in the mirror today wore a suit of armor disguised as fashion, a pristine, white-tailored suit by Alexander McQueen, sharp enough to cut, and purity enough to mock the filth of the day ahead. "You don't have to go, you know," Silas said. He was sitting on the sofa, reading the Wall Street Journal. Even he, the titan of industry, looked weary. The scandal had been exhausting, a media circus that had camped on their doorstep for weeks. "I do have to go," Genevieve said, fastening a single pearl earring. "I need to see it finished. I need to know the ink is dry." "He's destroyed, Jen," Silas said softly. "You've already won. The company is yours. His reputation is ash. Watching him get handcuffed is just twisting the knife." Genevieve turned to her father. Her eyes were dry, clear, and hard as diamonds. "He didn't just steal money, Dad. He stole 3 years of my life. He made me doubt my own sanity. I'm not going there to twist the knife. I'm going there to pull it out of my own back." The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan smelled of floor wax and damp wool. The courtroom for United States v. Preston Hayes was packed to capacity. Reporters from the Times, the Post, and every major financial blog were squeezed into the gallery, pens poised. They were hungry for the final act of the Billionaire divorce war. When Genevieve entered, a hush fell over the room, so complete you could hear the hum of the ventilation system. She walked down the center aisle, head high, flanked by Henri and a security detail. She took her seat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table. Then, the side door opened, and Preston was brought in. The transformation was shocking. The Preston Hayes of 6 months ago, the man who spent $500 on haircuts and moisturized with La Mer, was gone. In his place was a gaunt, shivering figure in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit. His skin was sallow, his eyes darting around the room with the frantic energy of a trapped rat. He had lost 20 pounds. When he saw Genevieve, he froze. For a second, the old arrogance flickered in his eyes, a desperate attempt to assert dominance. But it died instantly when he saw the impassive wall of white that was his ex-wife. He slumped into the defendant's chair next to his court-appointed public defender, a tired-looking man named Mr. Gorski, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honourable Judge Catherine Sobel swept into the room. She was known as the Hammer in legal circles, a woman who had zero patience for white-collar entitlement. "Be seated," Judge Sobel said, adjusting her glasses. She looked down at Preston over a mountain of paperwork. "Mr. Hayes, you have been found guilty on 3 counts of corporate espionage, 1 count of grand larceny, and 2 counts of computer fraud. The evidence provided by Archer Global, including video surveillance of you accessing restricted servers, was incontrovertible." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say?" Preston stood up. His legs were shaking so badly the table rattled. He looked at the judge, then he turned, ignoring his lawyer's hiss of warning, and looked directly at Genevieve. I just wanted to provide for my family," Preston croaked. His voice was thin, reedy. "Everything I did, the ambition, it was because I wanted to be worthy. I wanted to be someone." He looked at Genevieve, tears welling in his eyes. "Jen, tell them. Tell them I wasn't a bad husband. I made mistakes. But I loved you. Doesn't that count for anything?" The courtroom held its breath. All eyes turned to Genevieve. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She simply stared at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a bacteria culture. His plea wasn't love, it was manipulation, the same tool he had used to control her for years. He wasn't sorry he hurt her, he was sorry he got caught. Judge Sobel banged her gavel, shattering the moment. "Mr. Hayes, your attempt to address the victim is inappropriate and frankly pathetic," the judge snapped. "You didn't steal trade secrets for love. You sold them to a rival firm for a payout. You attempted to destroy the very family you claim to cherish. That is not love. That is parasitism." Preston flinched as if struck. "Preston Hayes," Judge Sobel read from the paper, her voice ringing out like a bell. "I sentence you to 60 months, 5 years, in a federal correctional institution, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay restitution to Archer Global in the amount of $2 million. "5 years," Preston gasped, clutching the table. "I can't. Judge, please, I won't survive 5 years." "You should have thought of that before you tried to sell Project Helios," Sobel said coldly. "Bailiff, take him into custody." As the marshals moved in, grabbing Preston by the arms to cuff him, he began to struggle. It wasn't a violent struggle, but a panic-induced flailing. "Jen!" he screamed, his dignity completely gone. "Genevieve, help me! Dad! Silas! Please don't let them take me." As they dragged him toward the side door, he locked eyes with Genevieve one last time. He was searching for pity, for anger, for anything to prove he still mattered to her. Genevieve slowly, deliberately, put on her sunglasses. She turned her head away. The door slammed shut, cutting off his wails. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, revealing jagged patches of brilliant blue sky. Genevieve stepped out of the courthouse doors and was immediately blinded by the flash of cameras. The press had been waiting. "Ms. Archer! Ms. Archer! Is it true you're taking over as CEO? Do you have a comment on your ex-husband's sentence?" Genevieve stopped at the top of the concrete stairs. She looked out at the sea of microphones. In the past, this would have terrified her. Today, it felt like a stage she was born to stand on. She stepped up to the cluster of microphones. "I will make one statement," she said. Her voice was steady, amplified by the recorders, carrying over the noise of the city. Today, the legal system did its job. But this story isn't about the man who went to prison. It's about the people who are still standing. She looked directly into the lens of the nearest news camera, knowing that somewhere, in a holding cell, Preston might see this on a TV screen. "Financial abuse is a silent weapon," she continued. "It strips you of your voice, your confidence, and your freedom. I was lucky. I had a family who caught me when I fell, but millions of women and men don't have a Silas Archer in their corner." A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. That is why, effective immediately, Archer Global is launching the Phoenix Initiative. "What is that?" a reporter from Forbes shouted. "It is a $50 million fund dedicated to providing legal aid, financial literacy, and emergency housing for victims of domestic and financial abuse," Genevieve announced. "We aren't just giving them shelter. We are giving them capital. We are giving them the power to start over, to build their own empires, so they never have to sign a divorce paper with a shaking hand again." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just polite applause, it was a roar of approval. Genevieve signaled to Henry. The Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb. As she slid into the leather back seat, she felt a vibration in her clutch. She pulled out her phone. It was a text from an unknown number. The message was short. "I'm sorry." She knew who it was. Preston had likely used his one phone call, or bribed a guard, to send a final text before his phone was confiscated for 5 years. Genevieve looked at the words. 2 years ago, those words would have made her crumble. They would have made her forgive him. She hovered her thumb over the screen. "Block number." She pressed it. "Where to, Miss Archer?" Henry asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. Genevieve looked out the window at the skyline of New York City. The sun was fully out now, reflecting off the steel and glass of the Archer Tower in the distance. She thought about the empty conference room where she had signed the papers. She thought about the coldness of that day. And then she thought about the fire that had burned it all away. "Take me to the office, Henri," Genevieve said, leaning back and closing her eyes with a smile. "We have a company to run." The car merged into the traffic, a sleek black shark in a sea of minnows, moving forward, never looking back. And that is how the man who thought he was a king ended up a prisoner. And the woman he treated like a servant became his judge, jury, and executioner. It's a brutal reminder that you should never mistake silence for weakness, and you never truly know who is sitting in the back of the room watching your every move. Preston Hayes learned the hard way that karma doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it walks in wearing a white suit and locks the door behind you. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate revenge and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Genevieve? Would you have blocked his number or sent one last reply? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story of billionaire drama and shocking twists. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.